Well, with me is Emeritus Professor and former Head of the Department of Philosophy at University College London, Professor Ted Honderich. Professor Honderich, welcome to Double Standards. Let's begin with this bid for UN statehood by the Palestinians. You've talked about Palestine in your work for decades.
I think it's an excellent idea that they are trying it on. I think it's an absolute moral disgrace that the President of the United States turns out to be a little bit of an Uncle Tom when he's up against neo-Zionism. That's my quick answer.
Obviously, to Ofcom, we're not being racist here. You've most controversially, perhaps, tackled a subject not just specific to Palestine, a more general subject about politics and the role of political violence. Before we get on to that, what made you choose that as a subject to concentrate on, and why do you think so few people do concentrate on that subject?
It was chance that got me into it. When I was a young lecturer, the professor said, "Write a book on the justifications of punishment for me, please." I did, being a sensible, rational young lecturer. Then some Americans said, "You've written about the justification of punishment. Turn your attention to political violence." Agreeable as always, I did that.
I hope what you said didn't make any impact on the U.S. justice system. Certainly the penal code has been in the news lately.
Right, well, they tried to make an impact on me. Whenever I speak in America, various neo-Zionist lads turn up and raise trouble. It's also true that Palestinians raise a little trouble for me. That must prove I'm wrong.
But you've worked on this and educated generations of students, and yet the framing of the debate of political violence in the Middle East is always one of Gandhi is the way forward, non-violence is the way forward, whereas you have talked about the nuances in the debate.
Well, just one quick nuance. Gandhi didn't say non-violence is the only way forward. With respect to violence, nobody thinks violence is really ruled out. If a woman is in the course of being raped and she can stop him by banging him on the head, does anybody believe she's supposed to remonstrate with him instead?
Well, Zionists would be the first to say that that rape analogy is not one applicable to the Middle East.
First of all, neo-Zionists might agree with the following thought, that anybody who says that violence is never to be persisted in, say, would have to think about this. When the Russian troops with the tanks were on their way to end the Holocaust, should they have stopped and said, let's have a conference in Geneva instead and discuss this? Nobody thinks that. It's simply not the case that anybody really believes there's no place for political violence. Now, as for whether or not the analogy of rape is one that can be brought into connection with what the neo-Zionists are up to in Palestine, it seems to me very simple. There are lots of ways in which rape is unlike what they're doing to the Palestinians, and lots of ways in which the two things are rather close. For example, there's no two sides to the story of a real rape. No two sides to the story of a real rape. There's no two sides to the Palestinians v. the neo-Zionists in Palestine either. Well, it's perfectly clear, and the entire world, a large majority of it, agrees. And if they get their votes translated into votes at the UN, you'll see that proved in a week or two.
You're not the only one to allude to power relations, of course. In the Academy, lots of people talk about power relations, but why do you think the way the media seems to speak about these situations is one seemingly without power? Is that a fault of the influence of the Academy, or have you had colleagues that are more persuasive in public discourse about the fact that these sorts of analogies are pointless?
Well, you might think it has very little to do with the Academy. It has rather a lot to do with the financing of public life and the vast amounts of money which are, for example, all important in Obama's failure to face up to this first strong moral challenge in connection with the UN. It is money. I've never been a Marxist. I've never read any Marx. And I never used to have the word capitalism on my lips. But I finally got around to it. I haven't got around to being a Marxist. But anybody who says, is the Academy responsible for what's happening, ought to be introduced, as I'm sure you have been, to the word capitalism and the use of money.
Of course, the Arab Spring, which has been seen by many to be in opposition to U.S. Hegemonic power in the region, in the Maghreb particularly. And again, they say, you see, these were peaceful revolutions. Revolutions shouldn't be violent. you would still reject this narrative that it's only through non-violence and, by extension, of course, the Palestinian Authority are the ones to talk to, and Hamas should never be spoken to?
Now, there's too much in there. I can't possibly handle that.
I pack it in.
So let me just handle the Arab Spring briefly. I haven't got much to say for Gaddafi, but I am, for that reason, a little hesitant about what to say about Libya in particular. I take it that his record is pretty bad. But I'm curious as to what kind of a society Libya was. I actually don't know. And I'm even more curious about what kind of a society is going to come out of the Arab Spring in Libya. I am, as you know, a professor of philosophy, so I go by other professors. And I heard one on the box sometime within the last fortnight or so. And he was asked, why was it that those people were still fighting on Gaddafi's side? And he gave three answers. And the first was because of tribal connections. And the second was because of regional connections. And the third was they were fighting for Gaddafi against the incoming government because they were connected with the side he was also connected with. The third thing, the poor. Well, now, I don't really know about that, but I'd like to wait a little bit to find out what I think about the Arab Spring. Wait until I get a few more facts.
When it comes to Gaza, because certainly there's unanimity, seemingly in the media, framing of the debate, Gaza, Hamas, they're not to be spoken to. We now have leaks showing that the Americans say we'll only talk to the Palestinian Authority.
What is happening in Palestine, what is being done by neo-Zionism, is such that it gives the Palestinians, I happen to believe this and it's got me into trouble, gives the Palestinians a moral right to their terrorism against neo-Zionism within all of historic Palestine. A lot of people believe that. Few people are in a position to be able to say it because they need votes or they need friends or something like that, or they're too young.
But you've been giving a philosophical justification from first principles, it has to be said, for this for years, and yet even the regulator of this program, when it's broadcast in Britain, may say what you just said is inciting violence. How is it that things seem to have got worse since you've been working on these topics?
Well, I've lately written a book whose title I'll give it. It's called Humanity, Terrorism, Terrorist War, and he'll find a section in there on incitement and what incitement is. I'm writing books. I don't incite people. I just give them the best possible reason for thinking that the Palestinians have a moral right, ... But,
of course, in return, you have been vilified. I think you were even thinking of suing someone for calling you an anti-Semite. How long do you think that confusion between anti-Zionism, anti-neo-Zionism, as you call it, and anti-Semitism is going to persist?
I think you shouldn't sue anybody for what could properly be regarded as an inane lie. Inane falsehoods don't really need suing. I happen to have been married to a Jewish woman. I've got Jewish people in my family. The general idea that I'm an anti-Semite is at the level of the public relations of Cameron. It's that kind of drivel.
Do you think it's got worse in terms of being able to debate subjects like the ones that you have been debating?
It's the case, to be a little more serious, that public discourse in Britain, and certainly in America, has been dragged down to a level such that getting a hearing for certain views is more or less impossible. I'm not quite sure what to do about that. I'm also not sure about what to do about what is rational with respect to the level of discourse that one goes in for oneself. Should one observe parliamentary language? Should one go in for academic restraint? Or should one, thirdly, show a proper and state a proper moral contempt for a start, neo-Zionism? I'm a little more drawn these days to that third possibility.
Well, President Obama certainly was very clear when he said they would use the veto.
He may be reasoning that he must carry on in such a way to achieve the most he can in that depraved society. And the most may be very little. The most may be so little that he's even got to do this wretched thing at the UN in order to achieve it. There's something called the principle of humanity. And in a brief sentence it is, take every rational step, and only rational steps, to get people with bad lives out of those bad lives. That is not a principle that's full of deference. It's not full of deference even to political reality. It's full of the attempt to say straightly what ought to happen. and as you gather, I stick to it.
Thank you, Professor Honderich.
Thank you.